Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Hughes, and I'm here today to give you guys a little bit of a presentation on the Arkansas Department of Public Safety Equipment Grant Program. I'm going to give it about 5 more minutes to let anybody join that may be kind of just now getting into the webinar. So I'll give about 5 minutes and then I'll really get started into our webinar. If you have any troubles with technical difficulties, please let us know. I know that we had a few issues last time, so if you have any issues, please just let us know so that you may not miss something in this webinar series. But I'll give it about a couple minutes and we'll let some people join on and then we'll get started in the webinar. Okay, everybody, I guess we'll go ahead and get started with this webinar series. Once again, if you're here, this is for the Arkansas Department of Public Safety Equipment Grant Program. And just a little brief overview for you guys. I have an overview about what we'll be talking about today. I'm going to do a quick introduction of myself, really go over a few of the Act 786 key points. I'm going to give you an overview of the program goals and what they mean in regards to the application process. And then I'm going to go through a step-by-step breakdown of our grant application. I'm going to highlight some important dates and some things to remember. And then I'm going to open the floor for question and answer after that. So if you guys have anything that you want to kind of ask me or get a better understanding of, feel free to wait. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to really open up that floor for discussion. So just a quick introduction, just introduce myself. My name is Dr. Mary Hughes, and I recently graduated with my PhD in criminology and criminal justice from the University of Arkansas Little Rock. And I currently am running the research and planning unit here at the Department of Public Safety. So I can really aid in that grant writing process. So I'm really here to just kind of be an aid in your grant application process. So a little bit of key points from Act 786 and what this grant program is. Really, the goal of our grant program is to improve trust between law enforcement and the communities your agency serves in Arkansas. So the grants can be awarded for non-lethal equipment, training, or accreditation purposes. That's really what we're aiming for if you're given these grant funds, to really utilize them for those purposes. All grant activity and expenditures must be reported to the governor and co-chairs of the Legislative Council. So you will have to partake in a little bit of the grant application if you are awarded the grant reporting process. And our grants are going to be rewarded to agencies in Arkansas, either in law enforcement, detention centers, or correctional agencies. And the grant committee was formed by Secretary Cook over at the Department of Public Safety. And this grant review committee will be who is going to be reviewing and approving or denying each of your grant applications that you set forth. I am not a part of that grant application committee. However, I am here to help assist you so that you can be successful when you go into that review process. So when looking at the Public Safety Equipment Grant Program, I've listed here 4 major goals to really think about when you're filling out your grant application packet. So the first is going to be looking at this goal of support. So really this program is aimed at support for agencies who want to provide best police practices in their community, because this grant was established so that we could kind of look at how do we rebuild trust within our communities and work on things such as accreditation and training. So really one of those goals of this program is to really support agencies who are trying to do best police practices in their community. The second is looking at this goal of improvement, looking at how can this program aid your agency in improving the trust between law enforcement and the communities your agency serves. The third goal is looking at evidence-based practices. So we're really kind of looking at how you can utilize this funding for evidence-based practices through state-of-the-art public safety equipment. So how may this equipment and this grant funding for this equipment help you do better police practices within your agency? And then the final goal of this program is to really look at model agencies. So if you are awarded this program, the goal is that we can kind of utilize your agency as a model agency throughout the state of Arkansas and ultimately throughout the nation when looking at ways to improve policing through transparency and accountability. So when looking at this, we do have a few program-specific goals that you should think of when filling out your grant application. The first is developing knowledge. So in this, it may be good in your application to provide an explanation of how your agency will develop new knowledge or advance existing knowledge about community policing activities or policing strategies that can be obtained through this grant. So how can your agency help kind of develop new knowledge in state-of-the-art public safety equipment? The second is to look at increasing awareness. So something to look in your application, maybe provide an explanation of how, if your agency is awarded this funding, an explanation of how your agency will increase law enforcement transparency, accountability, community relations, and ultimately public safety through this equipment. So how can your agency kind of show the awareness of why this is such an important need for your agency? The third goal is to look at increasing skills and abilities within your agency. So how might this grant funding aid your agency in doing better police practices? How may it allow your agency to be more state-of-the-art when trying to work on things such as transparency and accountability, whether that's through body cameras, storage systems to kind of house those video recordings, things like that. And then finally, that final goal is to increase practice. So it may be good in your application to really highlight how your agency will aid in providing quality and effective law enforcement practices if they are awarded this public safety grant. So how might these kind of goals show you want to kind of tackle in what these goals mean and how you're meeting these goals within your application process? So here forward, I'm just going to give you a grant application breakdown of each of the forms that you'll have to fill out and how you can kind of insert these goals within your application. So in looking at the grant application, there's a few things to make sure. You want to make sure that all of these forms that I go over today are filled out completely. The first, and I'll show you guys a copy of this, is that you want to make sure that you have a signed DPS application for the public safety equipment grant. So there's a certain form that I'll have where you kind of identify your agency name, and I'll go through what you have to fill out in the agency head and who will be representing kind of that coordinating person for the grant program. You'll also need to make sure that you fill out a detailed program description. You'll need a detailed problem statement, a clear, detailed summary of your project goals, a comprehensive and detailed budget proposal, and a detailed budget narrative. Once again, you'll want to make sure that all of these forms are filled out completely, and I'm going to go through each of these step by step. Also, when you're thinking about how your application is going to be reviewed, it's going to be reviewed on a point system. I have here a copy of what that point system looks like. As you can see, just the application information, making sure that you fill out that form, that's going to be 10 points. The budget proposal is going to be worth 20. The budget narrative is worth 10. Project description is worth 20. The problem statement is worth 20. And the project plans and goals are worth 20. So you have a total of 100 maximum points. And you can really see here where each of these points are going to in your application. So the first thing that you want to make sure that you look at, and once again, this form is downloadable on the Department of Public Safety homepage. You'll see a little photo of the governor signing the bill. You click on that and it'll bring you to a page with all of this information for these downloadable links. But the first link you want to kind of download is this project description. So when you're looking at this, you'll see a couple boxes. As you can see here, the first box is going to be that project description box. When you're filling out this is just a brief description that summarizes what your proposed project is. So if you're awarded this funding, what you're going to do with this. So what might you be utilizing this funding for? This is just an overview of your project. You want it to be about 500 words or less. In this, you really want to make sure you include a project purpose. So what's the purpose? What's your agency's purpose if they're giving this funding? What's the scope? So how can this aid and how is it going to reach these communities that your agency serves? What activities your agency will be utilizing this public safety equipment for. And then you want to highlight any key partners if that's applicable. You want to keep this kind of written for a general public audience, and you want to make sure that you have this entered into the appropriate text box. So this will just be what you need in that project description. And then you can also reference page 9 of the DPS grant packet instruction sheet if you have any questions or need a more detailed explanation of that. But that is kind of what you want to have in that project description box. You'll also notice a problem statement box. In this problem statement box, you'll also want this to be 500 words or less. And in this box, you want to make sure that you're connecting your agency's project. So the connection to the public safety issues in your community. So why might you need this funding? Is it because there's a lack of budget? Is there a need for transparency in your community? Will it aid in rebuilding trust within communities? These are the things that you need to be highlighting in that problem statement. And this is really an important aspect of your application because it's going to show why you are prioritized in needing that funding. You want to focus on an overview of the need for the state funding and then how this funding will aid in overcoming your agency's obstacles. So if it is something like you need to have body cameras, why might you need that? Is there a problem in your communities that you may need body cameras for? If you need a storage system for video equipment, is there because there isn't a place currently that you need that for, and it will ease some of these processes? So you really want to make sure that you're highlighting what those problems are. And again, you can reference page 9 of the DPS grant packet instructions to get a little bit more of a word-by-word overview of this. The third aspect of your application that you need to look at is your project plan and goals. When you look at this, you want to make sure it's in the appropriate box. Once again, you want to keep it about 500 words or less. And this is just going to be a brief description of your project goals. So what are the goals that you hope to achieve by getting this equipment? So how might it aid your agency and what goals can you meet over whether it be a long period of time or a short period of time? You want a brief description of your project plan of action to achieve these goals. So what are your goals and how do you plan on achieving them through this public safety grant equipment? And if your agency is granted this funding, how will this funding benefit the community? Because the main goal of this that falls in with that Act 786 is that you are trying to kind of rebuild this trust and work with communities, bridging that gap between community trust and policing. So you really want to make sure how this may benefit your agency, but also how it's going to benefit the individuals that your agency serves. So once again, you'll also really want to reference that page 9 of the DPS grant packet instructions if you need a little bit further detailed explanation or an example of what those projected plans and goals look like. And this will really come in handy if your agency is awarded funding, because one of these stipulations, if awarded funding, is that you'll need to provide a status update on the goals, objectives, and deliverables on a year timeline. So month by month, you'll be sending in kind of an updated report. So this will actually aid in that process for your agency later on to make sure that you have a clear description of your project plans and goals. The final box on this downloadable page will be that funding source. Sorry, I didn't mean to click through that too quickly, but you'll notice it says checkbox yes or no. You need to make sure that you check one of these boxes. And you'll see a little description under it. So all this funding source is referring to is if your agency has any additional funding within the agency that they may need this funding source for. So if you check yes, that states that your agency has additional funding that's also utilized towards the same purpose. If you check no, that just means that your agency does not have additional funding that can source this public safety equipment. The reason for that detailed description is that this is really to show if your agency does have an additional funding source, just highlight what that source is, how much that funding source is, and how why you may need this additional funding source. It doesn't mean that if you check the box for an additional funding source, that means that you're not as prioritized on the list. We just need to know why you need that additional funding source. Also, you'll notice in the application, I stated that you need a budget proposal. The budget proposal is, you can see kind of an overview. Once again, this page is downloadable on the DPS homepage under the grant application packet instructions. So if you just click on that for the DPS homepage, you can get to this budget proposal. When you're filling out your budget proposal, all this is going to be is a comprehensive list of items needed for this project. You want to make sure that you have an estimated cost of each item. All projects must follow the approved state or local purchasing procedures. You'll note in the instruction packet, it does say that individual items costing $5,000 or more with a useful life of more than 1 year are considered equipment. You'll also notice that individual items costing less than $5,000 are considered supplies or low value assets. You'll just need to kind of highlight what those are when filling out your budget proposal. Each budgeted item should be linked to resources needed for the project activities. So your budget proposal is going to really showcase what items you need, and they're going to mirror what you talked about within other aspects of your application. These items should be included. A couple examples are consumable supplies, hardware, or any equipment that your agency may be able to use this funding source for. Once again, you can reference page 9 if you need any additional information on that. The final part of the application is going to be that budget narrative. You'll notice there's a space underneath the budget proposal. You will want to make sure that you fill this out. The budget narrative, things to keep in mind is that it needs to be 250 words or less. In this, you want to list every category of expenses listed in the budget proposal. You want to just provide a detailed explanation of how the budget is cost effective and demonstrate how your budget maximizes direct funding linked to your project plans and goals. So if you have something in your budget proposal, your budget narrative allows you to show why that's necessary and how that links to your overall project description and goals. You want to make sure that these are mathematically sound, and you want to make sure that the narrative corresponds once again with that detailed budget proposal. You want to give a reasonable explanation of how costs are essential to the completion of your proposed project. So in this, keep in mind, you want to make sure that your budget narrative shows that your budget proposal and program are achievable, applicable, and necessary for the success of your program to meet these goals. Once again, you want to provide details of full anticipated costs for that full projected period of a year, because remember, this is a year-long grant program. So you want to make sure that your budget narrative highlights how those costs are going to be utilized and why they're necessary for that full year period. You don't have to have it in a spreadsheet format, but you can download the one that we have online, which I would recommend when filling that portion out. And also keep in mind, applicants are evaluated based on overall connection of the project description and problem statement and project plans and goals. So your budget narrative is going to be kind of evaluated on how it's applicable to the purpose of your project and how it shows that these items can meet those needs. Once again, if you need additional information on that, you just need to reference page 10 of the DPS grant packet instructions. And I'll have a little bit more detailed on a little bit more paragraph form that you can read through as well. The final thing that you'll want to keep in mind outside of the written portion of your application is the application for the Public Safety Equipment Grant Program Fund. You need to have this. This will just have the date, agency name, address. You can notice you'll have to have the employee identification number. And you'll want to make sure that you have the authorized representative signature as well as the agency head. If those are the same person, just get that individual to fill those out in both spots. But you will need this form moving forward. A couple dates to remember outside of that application breakdown is that November 12th is the deadline for application submission. They will close at the close of business. So you want to make sure that any questions that you have, that you get them in this week, because we are approaching that deadline relatively quickly. Once that deadline comes up on November 30th, the Public Safety Grant Committee will actually meet and convene to review each of these applications. On December 10th, announcements of awards and non-awards will be sent out. If you get an award, you'll get an announcement of that. If you do not receive an award, you can request feedback as to why you did not receive that award, because the committee will be jotting notes and different things for why you were either awarded or not rewarded. On December 10th, also, if you're awarded the grant funding, you will be sent a statement of grant of your statement of grant awards mailed with a memorandum of understanding. You want to make sure that you get this memorandum of understanding back to DPS no later than December 27th in order to receive that grant funding. And a final thing to keep in mind is that every month, if you are awarded funding, every month you will be sending in a monthly report to the Department of Public Safety, as well as participating in a pre-post survey to kind of see how this funding is being utilized and how it's meeting kind of the program goals. A couple other things to remember when filling this out: DPS will not be reaching out to applicants who do not adequately fill out their forms. When I say adequately fill out, if you fill out a box, it will be counted as that you have filled out that section. If you leave it empty, we will contact you to say you have missed this full section. But if you just submit like one sentence in your budget narrative, that will be counted as your budget narrative. We will not be reaching out for that, only if there is nothing within those boxes. So keep that in mind. Also, if your agency wishes to revise an application, revisions must be submitted by the application deadline on November 12th. You can do revisions, but you need to make sure that those are done by November 12th. Also, when you go to submit, you can notice that I have a link right here. This is a link for all these downloadable forms that I've gone over today. So you can just kind of go to our homepage, click on that photo of the governor signing the grant, or you are more than welcome to just copy and paste this grant link. This PowerPoint is also posted as well on this page. Final reports, if you are given this grant funding, will be collected on December 10th, 2022. Any unused funds by that December 10th deadline for that final report, if you have any unused funds, those will need to be returned to DPS. And you also need to keep in mind, if you are awarded this funding, that you will need to keep receipts for a 3-year minimum. So at this point, I'm going to open up the floor for question and answers. If anyone has any, feel free to send them in that. Also, for you guys as reference, I do have my email as well as my phone number listed here if you need to contact me for any questions moving forward. I know that we have things coming up right now with the grant deadline. So if you have any questions, this week is probably one of the best times to kind of reach out to make sure that your application is fully filled out. If you have any questions to make it better, feel free to let me know. But at this point, I'm going to open up the floor for discussion. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to kind of send those in. Does anybody have any questions? It might be. Okay, I have a question that just came in that says, how much can be awarded to each county? So each award is going to vary. As you probably know, we are only working with 500,000 at this point. We were allocated 40 million, but at this point we've only have 500,000 that we can distribute out. So this is really going to vary based on the grant committee. There is no subject amount for awards. It's going to just really be based on that problem statement. Awards can be partially funded. So if you do not receive the full amount, it may be because you only get partially funded, and there will be an explanation as to why. So at this point, there really isn't a solid answer on how much can be awarded. So it really is going to vary depending on that grant committee. But I do know it won't exceed that 500,000 budget that we're working with. Does anybody else have any questions? And also, if you're still unclear about any question that you have or any answer that I give, just let me know and I will try to clarify that the best I can. Does anybody else have any questions? When you do submit your application, I will say that you should get a confirmation email. As soon as that's submitted, you want to make sure that you get that confirmation email so that way you successfully know that your application has been submitted. And it'll just say, thank you, your application has been received. But make sure when you send in your application that you do receive that confirmation email. Does anybody else have any questions? And also, once again, if you don't feel comfortable answering, you're sending a question in the webinar, as you can see, I'll try to move this up a little bit. Feel free to reach out. My email is listed below. It's also listed online, as well as my number. You can feel free to call my office phone or reach out at any point in time, and I'd be more than happy to kind of assist you through any of this process. I'll leave the floor open for about 5 more minutes for questions. I'm not really getting any in. So if you have a question, please make sure to get it in. This will be our last webinar. So if you do have a question, make sure you either jot down my email or send it in. Okay, well, at this point, I'm not really getting any new questions, so I don't want to hold you guys here if you don't have any questions that you would like to send in. Once again, please feel free to jot down my email, shoot me an email for a question, anything. I'd be more than happy to assist and explain anything else more in detail that you may need. Once again, thank you for attending the Department of Public Safety Equipment Grant Program webinar, and we really look forward to your application, especially with the application deadline approaching quite soon. So make sure to get that in. We are really, really excited to go through this process. So thank you guys for your time, and we look forward to your application.